A pleasure to me all at last. Well, here we go. I have once again managed to come back home from the theater. While it's a short drive from here to and from, what I can basically say is that my memory has grappled onto a rather gruesome number 3. And this number 3 in question is going to be The Equalizer 3. The third film in the Equalizer series starring the one and only Denzel Washington. And it does make sense from my own perspective that I do in fact get into some more Denzel Washington material, since in recent times I have actually seen a lot of Denzel Washington related films. Most recently, 2010's Unstoppable, also starring Chris Pine. But that film will have its own significant review next time I go on to create films I should have talked about years ago. Until then though, let's go on ahead and move on with this bonus episode for TV shows that deserve the spotlight. The Equalizer 3. Not being a hardcore fan of this franchise in and of itself, I'll go ahead and explain it to the best of my ability. From what I can already gather, based on watching the third film itself, The Equalizer is a franchise that stars a government agent known by the name Roberto, an Italian-American whom is in fact as eager and confident as possible to protect the people that he loves and cares about in his own home. As he's always said, he's right where he wants to be. And in this case, it's Sicily. So, of course, I haven't really watched the other Equalizer films, at least not in full, enough to know fully about the character himself. But Roberto himself does seem like the kind old man with a cane by any means. But I probably should at least mention that the very beginning of the film basically centers around Roberto invading a winery compound of some sorts in the country of Italy. He killed a lot of people that were there, guarding some kind of secret. And what exactly is this secret? Well, it's basically a bunch of dirty drug money. Drugs in general. Amphetamine pills, to be specific. And it turns out the reason why he invaded this winery in Sicily is because he was actually able to get incredibly close to finding out the final clue as to how this amphetamine and drug money all came together in the first place. This exact winery, where the leader of the gang arrives in his own car, a Land Rover, alongside his son. Basically, they both enter the compound to find most of the guards dead, and Roberto just sitting there in a chair, waiting for their arrival. The leader goes inside, and basically, Roberto is at gunpoint in multiple angles. He tells them that they have 9 seconds on his watch to make a reaction before he does something on his own. And you will not believe what he manages to do within that time. He surprisingly manages to evade gunfire despite multiple pistols being pointed at his head. That's crazy. And I figured that John Wick was unbelievable in and of himself. His skill of being able to avoid bullets just like that. A bullet can fly at almost 1,000 miles per hour, breaking the speed of sound. So, how he's able to dodge that kind of gunfire, especially when it's at point blank or close range, typically within a foot of his own face, is beyond me. But he manages to defeat those guards and even take down the leader himself in a pretty gruesome manner. But then he finds a key attached to him. This key is in fact supposed to unlock something in particular. But he heads back outside to find the boy still sitting in the Land Rover in the passenger seat. He demands he gets out, and then he goes somewhere only to get shot in the back. A .22 caliber bullet enters him in his back, and he basically collapses, almost as if he bled out at some point. The film is not necessarily clear upon what exactly happened to him, but a bullet did in fact hit him right there. a certain section of his spine, which is in fact responsible for allowing him to walk. He's nursed back to health by a local doctor in Sicily and eventually is able to walk on his own, but with the usage of a cane. He's as careful as possible to walk on the stairs without tripping and falling over, which could have definitely killed him in an instant. He eventually visits some restaurants, enjoys some local cuisine, some tea, but then he makes a phone call over to the CIA. And well, eventually this is where we're introduced, at least in this film in particular, since again, I haven't really seen much of the Equalizer in general. We basically come across a female character, a partner, if you will, of Roberto himself. She's able to extract the data that he was able to harvest from that winery that he visited. And well, it eventually comes down to the point where she ends up going to Sicily herself to visit him in person and discuss more details about the whole mission in general. This drug bust, as we'll basically put this together, is simply put quite an operation that's being held, believe it or not, by local Italian mafia gang members. Basically, a large group of them are known to be pestering other people. A small group in question, which basically seemed like local thugs, but were in fact members of this hierarchy, were actually pestering around people. They managed to beat up a member of the local police, the captain himself, as well as extort his family. They threaten his life, smash him in the head, and beat him to a pulp. Roberto basically has had enough by this point. And it gets even worse when you get to know the fact that a shop that he visited at one point ends up getting torched. So, if you think that everything so far is terrifying enough because of these gang members, then oh boy, wait until you see what happens later. Basically, Roberto basically goes like, that's enough. And then he basically pays a small visit to this gang and murders him in cold blood. Oh man. This is basically what you call brutality in a nutshell. So, I guess you could say this is some sort of like vigilantism that he's committing right off the bat. The fact is that he's witnessed straight up arson, assault, and potential murder even. A lot of things have taken place. And well, the fact is, Roberto is just unbelievable as a character. I've never quite seen anything as insanely unreal as this. I mean, it was insane enough that John Wick basically had to use fighting skills to survive and save his own life from being killed, like a next generation Jason Bourne. But Roberto, you could say, is like Batman on crack. I mean, I wonder if Robert Pattinson has seen the Equalizer 3 himself and just gone all flustery in his face, just knowing that he plays a literal vigilante in his own right. But the real difference, though, is that this vigilante in particular kills people as a solution to the many, many problems in the country of Italy that are going on right now. Oh, but you know what? It gets even better. Because the leader of this crime family eventually comes up and starts to threaten the lives of the people himself, even taking one member of Roberto's own friends. Like, he tries to pull the hostage situation, grab him by the neck with a gun pointed to his head, ready to kill him if Roberto doesn't even bother showing up at one point. Well, of course that's exactly what does end up happening. Roberto comes back, armed to the teeth, forced to give up his guns, and then eventually what goes down is, well, they give up on their operation. But even the leader himself has to know that because of the fact that he threatened a lot of people and was even putting down a huge exploitation just so he could continue on his little operation going on with the drugs and the money and whatnot. Of course, it all had to come to an end at some point. Even Roberto himself was planned on going in possibly berserk. But no, again, this isn't like John Wick at all. No, this is someone who goes all out vigilante in a stealthy way. And well, that's exactly what happens. He invades the manor where the rest of the members of this gang were inside of at one point during the nightfall, when some were asleep and others were on patrol. He manages to take them out one by one until eventually coming to the head himself. He wakes up out of bed, terrified, and shooting bullets all over the place as if he's seeing things. But he eventually gets knocked to the ground, tied up, with foam coming out of his mouth. Turns out Roberto was not only able to hogtie him in a certain way that he was unable to escape from, but it turns out he also managed to shove amphetamine pills down his throat. How else would that explain the immense amount of foam coming out of his mouth? I find that to be not only disgusting, but insanely disturbing. Like, I was not only uncomfortable during that whole moment where it was basically a tortuous death, because the man threatened so many lives in Italy. Of course, while retaliation is common, in real life, so to speak, as a means of payback towards the many lives that they have terrorized, you'd think that you could go even more further than this. Roberto himself taking on a mafia gang, just like that, and torturing the crap out of the head leader until he eventually dies and falls to the ground. And that's insane. I mean, he's allowed to roam outside with whatever life he has left. He stumbles around, gets hit by a car, and then eventually falls unconscious and dies. That is what you call tortuous. Like, beyond belief, even. Of course, his death is declared to be an overdose of amphetamine pills. And while we do get to see the so-called happy ending take place, with a family getting their money back after it was all stolen from this gang, and Roberto's partner recovering in the hospital, we do, in fact, get to have a bit more take place. Because one morning, Roberto is enjoying some more tea when a team of people dressed in blue come by. Turns out a football club had won their season, and he would join the party in celebration. So, I don't know about you, but that actually does help to make up for all the unbelievable torture and humiliation and brutal murder that had taken place. I mean, that'd be like if Doom were to come to an end, there's some kind of party set to Cool in the Gang, with Doom guy wearing a hat and all that and performing some crazy dance moves. I mean, that would be amazing. Like, if there was another Doom game made by Bethesda and id, I hope Microsoft does something like that. A Doom 3, if you will. A sequel to Doom Eternal. But anyways, this kind of ending does help to make up for the pain and torture that we were all put through in the theater. So, yeah, you know what? I don't know about you. My overall scoring on this is going to be an easy 7.4 out of 10.1. And so, I haven't really given all that much thought into scoring of movies by any means. But when you get down to it, this is only one viewing that I've had for every new film I've seen in theaters. And it is basically my own initial mind process. And so, maybe after some time I could give them even closer examination. And the fact is, I really do have to catch up on the Equalizer films themselves. However, there is another sequel that I am in fact going to be able to watch at some point. Sylvester Stallone's The Expendables franchise. I'll talk a bit about that film later on though, as there are lots of other shows that I will have to cover at some point in time. So, it'll be back to shows soon enough.